What's going on, everybody? It's LibThims back at you for part 2 of the Samos Cup. In the first part, we've covered the first enad, or letters A through theta, or numbers 1 through 9, which constitutes the first row of the periodic table of letters. So in this part, we're going to go through the second enad, or I through Q, or numbers 10 through 90. Before we get into that, I just want to say that the reason I'm making this video is that I've been talking with Dimitris Psychoios in the last few days in email. And in 2005, he wrote this article called The Forgotten Art of Isopsephy and the Magic Number KZ. So he says, from the very beginning, the alphabet should have had 27 signs. That is 3 enads. These are the Egyptian enads, which goes up through 27 in order to meet the needs of the mathematicians. That is, to meet the necessity of using the enads of the Egyptian numeral system. And then he also says, alphabetic writing systems, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, Coptic, Armenian, Georgian, and others were created or adapted accordingly to serve the needs of mathematicians. So I have his article here. And in his last page here, here's the article. I have it listed as very good, 67 pages. He says, it is strange how everybody wonders if it was possible for humble workers, Semitic prisoners of war, in fact, to have invented the alphabetic writing. So he's talking about the Sinai model, which is Alan Gardner's. Again, that's Alan Gardner's model, where he says that the alphabet was invented by Semites in these mines. So this is what the mines look like. We see Robert Blake and Chrysop Lake in 25A, crunched down in the Sinai turquoise mines, looking at wall graffiti. So how is it, and this is temperatures here as they were reported are 115 degrees during the day. So how can somebody believe that turquoise miners could, in their spare time working 10 hours per day, could invent the alphabet? So there's the original model, and there's after Gardner published this article, where he says that letter A comes from these cave markings, which look like this. So you can barely see. There's scratches on little marks on the wall, and supposedly the idea here is these are alphabet letters, which is incorrect. And then now we've got this dumb model, which really makes like totally stupid. But Psychoios then emailed me yesterday after my first encounter with him. When I asked him about this, how he thinks that the alphabet was invented by engineers. Look at here, he also says, A cannot possibly have originated from a picture of a slow-moving, sluggish ox, which represents unreasoned force, if not stupidity. So in other words, the whole thing is completely stupid that letter A comes from this animal head on this cave wall. He says his theory was that A comes from the engineer's A-level plum, but that's incorrect. But So over he says that it makes more sense if the alphabet was invented by, he says, no one should discuss the possibility of it being the work of engineers, even though the myths seem to point in this direction. So he says in this article written in A50 that he conjectures that the alphabet was invented by engineers. So then I emailed him and this is what he said to me just about 2 days ago. The Greek language doesn't have any relation with Egyptian or Phoenician languages. They are totally distinct languages. So the Greek language was not invented by Egyptian engineers. No one knows how languages were invented. So I'm just confused about this, and I'm making this video. Hopefully he'll watch it, and we'll see what he says in reaction to it. Because he's one of the only, there's only been 3 people that have loosely said that I know of that the alphabet might have come from Egypt via engineers. One is Martin Burnell. He says that 25% of Greek writing came from Egyptian hieroglyphs. He says, I think it worthwhile to look for Egyptian etymologies of Greek forms. And he also says, I make no attempt to replace the generally accepted Indo-European etymologies, but I make a large attempt to replace this. I consider them all as complete garbage. But what is interesting is that Martin Burnell is the grandson of Alan Gardner. So when Martin Burnell grew up, he grew up under the shadow of his grandfather's work in Egyptology, such as his book on Egyptian grammar, which is what people consider the Bible of modern Egyptology. So one thing I want to ask Demetrius, if he watches this video, is how exactly can the Greek language have no relation with Egyptian or the Phoenician language if the Egyptian is the longest attested language in use. It was in use for 4,500 years, according to extant evidence, from 5700 A to 1200 A. And then Greek is the second longest language in use. And secondly, how can the Greek language not have any relation with Egyptian or Phoenician language if all of the Greek letters are Egyptian hieroglyphs reduced or simplified into letter number characters, and if the Sesostris Empire conquered this much, and we don't know exactly what year this was, and we also know that in Greece there's pyramids. So for example, the Argos pyramids built in 4200 A or minus 245, they were building pyramids here. And we also know that the Greeks built some of the main temples, like Athena, to be shaped like a triangle to match the stars like the Egyptians did. So all of this was under Egyptian influence in 4200 A. It's very conceivable that this script derived from Egyptian hieroglyphs, owing to the fact that it's the oldest attested language, and that's how it influenced all of these languages going forward. In other words, hieroglyphic script was reduced into lunar script, and then it spread outward around Europe, Asia, and lower parts of Africa. Okay, so that's that one. Now we're going to go to letter I, Horus. Now Horus is the name of Horus is Omega ROS in his original spelling. So Omega is the Milky Way cow, or Hathor, and Hathor, here's the solar boat of Ra. We believe this is Ra presently, riding through the Milky Way at night and then reborn in the morning. So that's where you get Omega R. So supposedly Ra gets old at night, and then he's reborn as Horus in the morning. So Horus is the 10 value sun. Ra is the 100 value sun. And then A is the new Lotus born sun, which is value 1. And Lotus is the 1,000 value sun. So all of these reduce back to 1. If you divide any of these numbers by 9, the remainder will always be the base number. So for example, if you divide 1,000 by 9, you can go all the way up to 999 with a leftover of 1. And if you divide 200 so if we have 200 divided by 9, it's going to go in 22 times. So 22 times 9 equals 198. So if we divide 200 by 9 22 times, we'll get 198, and we'll have a remainder of 2. So this 220 are reduced to the base of 2. 300, if you divide by 9, reduces to the base of 3. So that's all. Each row can be reduced to the base. Now, Demetrius, in his article, uses a word in Greek for this base. So here we go. So Demetrius, he wrote this whole article because he studied the Samos Cup, and he was really intrigued by the fact that it goes all the way to Sampi. And he knew this was the oldest Greek abecedarium. And so he conjectured that the abecedarium, see here he says, the abecedarium of the Herion of Samos is the oldest known Sampi in Greek inscriptions. So what he wondered is, why are these Greeks writing this Sampi, even though it's not used in Greek literature? For example, here's the letter frequency in Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, where you see E is the most frequently used word, and Iliad is E is used more. Presumably, Iliad's more sexual because it has more E's than the Odyssey, but Sampi is not used. Sai is he's also wondered why his last name, as he told me in email, is Psychoios, so it means son of soul, and he was wondered why his surname has Sai in it, but it's so rarely used in. It looks like it's used more in Iliad than Odyssey. So he spent a couple years researching this, and he wrote a book in Greek. And the article he told me this is the reduced translated version of the book that he wrote. So he says that we have to take the Samos Cup and divide it into 3 rows like this. Enad 1, Enad 2, Enad 3, like this. And this, you can use this as he says when he was a kid, he used a mathematician's slide rule. So I grew up on using this when I first studied math in engineering school. so I don't really know. I need to learn how they use slide rule, but he says you can do this. If you divide these like this, you can use it like a calculator, which is quicker than an abacus. And he says these bases are called pith menis. So each one of these reduces to the base 500, or reduces to the pith many of 5. So here we have Horus, omega ROS, and so somehow the name Horus, I forget the cipher for it, is something like Ra becoming Ra the Elder, and then reborn as Horus. Would be the noon sun or something, the morning sun. This would be the most powerful sun. This would be something like the morning sun. And also we know that one cipher is that Ra's, all of these double names that we've been talking about here. For example, that the name Philia with an IA means love, which is means love, and then Philia Island, which is spelled different, is Philia Island, but they both equal, they're isonyms, iso number words, so they both equal 551. So the secret name of Philia Island with an AE versus an I, or an AI versus IA, the letters are switched, but they have the same number. So the secret name of Philia Island is love, so it's Love Island. And this is where here we see Philia Island, which is this is in Gnome 1. Isis turns into a kite, and Philia Island is shaped like the kite that Isis turns into. And this is Gay Island. It has 2 E's in it. Well, the body of Osiris is buried over here as a mummy, and then so Isis turns into a kite, flaps her wings over Osiris after she recovers his lost phallus. So there's also 3 phalluses of Osiris. There's the lost one. There's the one that Isis uses as her thumb, and there's also a golden one. So that's another one of the reasons why E is the triple phallus letter. It's kind of a sacred letter or something like that. So she turns into a kite at Philia Island, which is right here, and she flaps her wing over Osiris, and then Osiris is reborn, and then he goes up to he's reborn here, Philia Island, he goes up to the pole star. So if you look Google Osiris Judgment Hall, you always find the Egyptians called this the leg of Set, or it looks like a big piece of a bone, leg of ham or something like that. You always find a piece of this pointed at the throne of Osiris. So we know that the throne of Osiris is by the pole star, and Osiris gets his mouth opened by the Mishtul tool. So, and also the secret name of Cephio, which is 1 digit. That's what Cephio means, digit in Greek, equals 288. And then Picus also equals 1288, is the Greek word for cubit. So, which is the entire length. So this is called the 1 Picus or digit, and Cephio, which is the entire length. They both equal 1288. So the secret name of cubit is Cephio. And this we know from the Egyptian story of the secret name of Ra, and that Ra is the powerful at 100 in this hot summer sun around August when the flood is at its peak. But then he starts to get old, like when the sun gets colder in December, and he ends up, Isis gets a snake and mixes it with a drool of Ra as he gets old, and then she uses the snake to bite Ra, and she obtains power. Ra gets old, And so Ra says, Isis says, because she wants to reanimate Horus, who got stung by a scorpion, she tells Ra that if you tell me your secret name, I'll heal you. So Ra finally gives in and tells Isis his secret name, which is, so we know Ra equals 101 because it's R is 100 plus 1 is 101. So the cipher that Ra's secret name is 101, and that becomes the isonym or of anonym, which is the root of animation. So Ra's secret name is Anim. Isis gets the power of Ra, and she uses it to reanimate Horus after he's stung by a scorpion, bring him back to existence, and he becomes the 1,000-value sun. And then the 1,000-value sun reduces back through modular 9 to the base of 1. So now we're up to K. Horus is really complicated, but we'll just skip that complications for right now. We're going to get to K. So K is the Ankh with its two arms to the side, and it's holding on to the pole star here. Ankh, S34 hieroglyph. It's value 20, and it's tested to 5,000A. So here are the three stars we were talking about. The Egyptians believe that here's one pole star, Little Dipper, in the sky, and they made this Mishtu tool which opens the mouth of the Cyrus mummy. And then also the Nile River from Gnomes 1 through 7 is also shaped like the Little Dipper. So it was believed that this is Polaris on Earth, and that these two Ankh arms here, situated here, hold onto the pole. And that's called and that goes up to Polaris. And also the cipher, newly decoded cipher for this is that in Greek, according to Herodotus, the star is called the Polon. So this is Pul, it equals 300. So we got P is P is 80 plus O 70 plus L is 30, another 70 plus 50, and you get 300. So 300 is the main, pretty much, this is 300 is where Thoth makes the alphabet letters in the Light and I 350 papyrus, or stanza 300. So this is the Ankh holds on to the pole star, and that is where letter K comes from. It has something to do with timekeeping and the rotation of the pole star at night, and what time, and the time of the times of things. So now we're going to do letter L. So letter L, as we just looked at, is the Mishtu tool. And it became this. Some of the early Greek ones were just written like this, and it eventually became reverted and became letter L. But here we're going to look at a glyph of he's putting the Mishtu tool, the letter L, to the mouth of the mummy. And this Little Dipper pulls the Orion constellation up in November and December. And we see Horus putting the mouth to the mummy. So here's We got the mummy here. He's dead. There's supposed to be a piece of iron at the tip of this. It's pulling his soul up. He has iron. Let's see. This is, and the tip of this is iron, and the magnet is inside of his body, and it's pulling him up, bringing him back to life. That's letter L, the Little Dipper. So right here, this is where, this has to do with the opening of the, this is where all the letters, all the language letters come from column 3. So G means generation. So grammata is what the letters are called in Greek. And then we get letters in Latin. Libros means books. And then T in Greek means types, which is the form of the letter. And then Thoth makes the letters at 300. So this is the main alphabet generation column. And also, when we put the, so Osiris gets cut up. He gets thrown into the Nile, and somewhere in here, this Djed is over here. Isis finds his body, and then he arises. So the idea is they put the Little Dipper, the Mishtu tool, to his mouth. There is the magnet right here. Or no, this is a piece of iron, which is the 7th gnome. And then this is Polaris, the magnet. So this pulls his body up, and he gets risen at the Psi letter, which is the last name of Psychoios, Demetrius' last name, son of Sol. So now we're going to go to letter M. Well, I just looked this one up real quick. Originally, it was Isaac Taylor who said M came from an owl, because somehow it was decoded that owl meant M in Egyptian. So he drew the owl and made it into an M. So I decoded correctly that letter M comes from the Mot symbol. This name Mot, and that's the sickle. And then if you see there, it's M, the Mot glyph, and it overlaps with the Phoenician M with a perfect match. So there's the sickle. Those are sickle blades. Flintstone. The Flintstones, they have preserved Flintstones dating to 8000 A, which makes it technically the oldest extant letter, but the wood is there's no wood. Then we have letter N as the Nile. This was determined by Strabo, the Greek geographer, and then Eratosthenes, as I recall. But the letter N comes from this N bend right here. It's the N shape of the Nile. So when Sesostris controlled Egypt, he based everything on this letter N. Which you see right here. It's the Napata branch. It goes from cataract 3, 4, 5, and 6. And that's where letter N comes from. So the way this works is that when the flood starts, here we see the shape of letter N, and flood comes from the Ethiopian mountain snow. So it melts over here, and then then Sirius rises on June 24th, and then flood waters rise to 150 days. So the first, and Sirius is first seen at the first cataract, right here. So water's over here. The Ethiopian mountain is over here, and then the floodwaters go through the dam, and then the floodwaters start to rise 28 cubits here, and then it goes down, flooding everything down to the delta, where waters rise about 4 to 5 cubits. So now we're going to get to O. So O and P are seem to be what two of the more complicated letters. So the flood comes, Osiris gets chopped into 14 pieces by Set, chops him into 14 pieces, throws his parts in the Nile. Now, Osiris becomes, he floats after he's chopped up into 14 pieces. Set, his brother, throws him into the Nile, and he floats, or he's trapped in a chest like this by 72 conspirators. There's two myths for the death of Osiris. One is he's chopped up 14 pieces. One is he's trapped in a chest. So the chest part is where he becomes the Djed, which is letter after letter N. So that's right here. So that's the 15th letter, which is right here, and Djed is holding the pole. This is the ecliptic pole. So this is the pole of the Earth, and it's tilted by 23 degrees to the parallel. As compared so it's the Djed is tilted by 20 degrees. It goes up like this. And that's the ecliptic pole, and then the Ankh is the pole that connects to the North Pole. And then they look like this. They're separated by 23.5 degrees. So this part right here is where letter P comes from. And this is the bottom part of the eye, of the so-called Eye of Horus, or Eye of Ra. And then the early Greeks, P's look like this. So this is the first part, the long part is the Polaris pole, and then the part that goes over here is the ecliptic pole. That's where letter pi comes from. So there's Polaris pole, and then there's ecliptic pole. So at the end of the year, on January 8th, as we'll talk about shortly, Janus, Sampi equals 331, and it equals Janus in Roman times. So at the end of the year, the Greeks raised the Djed, and the Greeks raised Dionysus, and then we presently raise the Christmas tree in holiday season. So after N, Osiris gets thrown in the Nile and he becomes this Djed, which is supposedly his backbone. And he's holding the ecliptic pole. And then he floats the Djed Osiris is thrown in the Nile, and then he floats as his chest down here all the way to Byblos, which is right here, over here. And Byblos is at the center of the T. And this is where the Egyptians also called the Nile, Greeks called it the Nilos, which means 365 in alphanumerics, but the Egyptians also called the letter O the Nilikon too. And so the point about Osiris floating to Byblos is that the name Byblos is the number 3.14, 314. So the idea here is that the circumference of the Earth, or divided by the diameter, equals 3.14, or 3 plus 14 over 100 as the Egyptians would have done it. So this was a cipher that he had to float to Byblos. Then Isis had to go and track down his body, or he'd grown into this tree in Byblos. Isis finds the tree, cuts his body down, and then brings him back to Egypt. So that's part of the story of the Isis and Osiris. So that is the Djed. So that's the pull of the Earth, not pointing to the pole star, but the way the Earth rotates around the sun, which is different than the pole star, which is always fixed, and sort of represents instability. So Egyptians believe that once per year, the poles would try to align at the end of the year. So then we know that after Osiris is thrown in the Nile, he becomes a Djed and he floats to the center of this, and then this might be where the ocean comes from, that there's the Polaris star in the eye. We also know that this black part here is called the Chem, which is where the word chemistry comes from. It's called the Arche by Plutarch. And so that's where letter O comes from. And then also, we also know there's another cipher for that O is that in Hebrew, letter I is known to be the I, whereas in Greek, O is called Omicron, which means micro O. O micro. And it has a word value of 360. But in Hebrew, it's called Ayin, and it's also called that same thing or that's Arabic name and Hebrew name. But in Hebrew, the value of the word is 130, and that equates to violet in alphanumerics. And violet is the lowest wavelength of the rainbow. So it's a way of saying that the I, or the O, is the eye of God, or something like that, or the light from the eye of God. So we know that O means I in Hebrew, which means that O is I in Hebrew, but in Greek it means little o, micro O. So that could be the Philae Island and Polaris eye in the sky. Then underneath the eye is the letter P. So this is letter P right here. What's underneath the eye? Or this person drew it backwards. something like this. So this is the pole star. This one would be the pole star. And this one would be the ecliptic, like that. So they're out of alignment at letter P. And then Q is the Thoth monkey. So this is Thoth is the baboon. It's one of the forms of the Thoth, the alphabet or god. So here we see him drawing the tail, and that's his body. Now the Thoth one is the one that greets the sun in the morning, and he's also the one that holds up the eye. Thoth monkey holding up the eye, and the curl part of the eye is R, and there's Thoth. And that became qoppa in Greek. And here we see Hermes riding with his horse, and there's the qoppa below the Pegasus is the horse of Hermes. So we know that this got rewritten into Pegasus and Hermes, and then Q. But originally it was the baboon. Holds the eye. And the curl part is R. That's why we have... That's why P, Q, R follow each other. P, Q, R, because it's all part of the eye. So here we see Xi. Cyrus turns into Jed. He's thrown in the ocean, 15. Then Pole is the top of the eye, bottom of the eye. And then the Thoth monkey holds up the eye. And then this curl part is R. And that's why we're going to go to our next Enad letter here. So we'll take a break on this one here, and then we'll get back in a few minutes.